What if I told you the most terrifying moments in Roman military history had nothing to do with battle and everything to do with survival? Roman soldiers were trained to obey orders, hold formation, and fight without fear. They learned discipline so strict that entire armies could move like a single body. But there were moments when no training could save them. When supplies vanished, when formations collapsed, when retreat became chaos, when hunger, thirst, and fear stripped away every rule they had ever lived by. In those moments, Rome's finest soldiers were forced to do things they would never choose under normal circumstances. Things brutal, things desperate, things almost impossible to imagine. Today we look at 10 real moments that reveal what humans are capable of when survival is the only law left. And number 1 is the kind of nightmare no soldier ever truly came back from. Number 10. At first glance it seems small, just a flask. But small things become priceless when death is measured in drops of water. The standard drink of the Roman soldier was posca, a harsh mixture of water and sour wine vinegar. It refreshed, disinfected, and lasted longer than plain water. Every soldier carried some, but during long marches under blazing summer heat, the flask often emptied long before the road did. Then a man beside you collapsed. From heat, from wounds, from exhaustion, and hanging at his side was a full flask. Roman military culture had rules about looting the dead, even dead comrades. Taking from a fallen brother was frowned upon, morally complicated, and emotionally heavy, but thirst does not care about rules. Letters and memoirs from the ancient world occasionally mention soldiers surviving because they drank from the flask of a dead companion. They wrote it plainly, no apology, no shame, no explanation. The dead no longer needed it. The living did. This was not cruelty. It was survival reduced to its coldest mathematics. A Roman soldier was trained to endure anything, and sometimes endurance meant drinking from the hand of the dead. Number 9. In 52 BC, Julius Caesar laid siege to Alesia, the stronghold of Vercingetorix. Then the impossible happened. A massive Gallic relief force arrived, and Caesar's army became trapped between two enemies. One inside the walls, one outside them. Supplies had been calculated for a shorter siege. Food ran low. Hunger spread. The first to be sacrificed were the cavalry horses. In the ancient world, horses were wealth status and military power. They took years to train and enormous resources to maintain. But starving men do not eat prestige. A horse was no longer a weapon. It became meat. The cavalry mounts were slaughtered and rationed among the troops. For many riders, this was more than losing equipment. A Roman cavalryman often knew his horse like a partner in war. It had carried him through danger, obeyed him in chaos, trusted him in battle. Now he had to eat it. Caesar records the decision with brutal simplicity. The horses were eaten. The siege continued. Alesia fell. And in that moment, Rome's war animals served their empire. Better as food than they ever could in combat. Number 8. When battle ends, the dead do not disappear. They remain where they fell. And sometimes they become part of what comes next. During siege warfare, Roman soldiers occasionally used enemy corpses to reinforce weak points in defensive lines. Bodies were piled against gaps in earthworks, used to thicken barricades, pressed into sections of rampart built too slowly for the speed of war. To modern minds, it sounds monstrous. To Roman minds, it was practical. Their own dead were honored, buried, and remembered. Burial associations existed to ensure proper rites. But enemy dead were different. They were no longer warriors. They were objects in the landscape. Resources. If a corpse could help keep a living soldier alive for one more night, the decision was simple. Ancient writers mention such acts without outrage or drama. That silence tells us everything. To Rome, survival mattered more than symbolism, and the living always came first. Number 7. A wound in the ancient world could kill twice. First through blood loss, then through infection. Rome developed military medicine to prevent this. Orderlies, field treatment, and military hospitals all existed to save the wounded. But medicine was not always nearby, on patrol, on isolated marches, after battles with too many casualties. Sometimes a wounded man had only himself. That is when Roman soldiers turned to self-cauterization. They burned their own wounds shut. A heated blade, a red-hot metal tool, a burning brand from the fire. Anything hot enough to stop bleeding and seal flesh. The pain would have been immediate and unbearable, but the alternative was slower. Bleed to death now, or rot from infection later. Roman medical writers like Celsus describe cauterization in clinical detail, proving it was not madness. It was recognized emergency treatment. Knowing it was necessary did not make it easier. It only made it possible. Imagine the mental strength required to press fire into your own flesh and keep moving afterward. Number 6. Thirst creates decisions hunger never can. A starving man can wait. A dehydrated man cannot. Roman commanders understood contaminated water long before modern science explained it. They knew stagnant pools and foul sources brought sickness. Vegetius warned against bad water. Experience taught the same lesson. But knowing something can kill you does not matter when you are already dying. In the deserts of the Near East, in the marshes of the Rhine, in North Africa's dry campaigns, Roman soldiers drank water they knew was dangerous. Mud-filled water, rotting water, water shared with animals, because the choice was simple: die today from thirst, or risk dying later from disease. Some never survived the water, some survived both. Most wrote nothing about it because it was common. That is what makes it horrifying. Not that it happened, but that it happened so often, it became normal. Number 5. The strongest bond in a Roman legion was not between soldier and emperor. It was between 8 men. The contubernium was a tent unit of 8 soldiers, who lived, marched, ate, and fought together. They shared hardship daily. They became closer than many families. These were the men who knew your fears, the men who carried your gear, the men who stood beside you in battle. And sometimes they were the men you had to leave behind. During chaotic retreats, wounded soldiers could slow an entire unit. Carrying one injured man might doom everyone trying to escape. Roman logic was ruthless. The mission came first. If one man endangered many, he was abandoned. Commanders gave those orders. Soldiers obeyed them. And somewhere behind them, a wounded friend understood exactly what had happened. Ancient accounts mention such moments briefly, too briefly, because some pain cannot be described in detail, only endured. Number 4. Some survived Roman disasters by doing nothing at all. After catastrophic defeats like Cannae or the Teutoburg Forest, victors often walked the battlefield, finishing off the wounded. If they found movement, you died. So survivors lay among corpses and pretended to be one of them. Imagine it. Blood around you, men screaming nearby, footsteps coming closer, someone checking bodies only feet away, your lungs begging for deeper breaths, your muscles desperate to twitch, your mind screaming to run, and you remain still, not for seconds, for hours. This was not skill learned in training. It was raw control born from terror. Some who survived later returned to Rome, but part of them likely never left that field. Number 3. Starvation destroys dignity first, then strength, then life. During supply collapses in Caesar's Gallic campaigns and many later wars, Roman soldiers reached the point where normal food no longer existed, so they ate the land itself. Grass, roots, raw grain pulled from fields. Food never meant for human consumption in that state. It caused cramp, sickness, and pain in bodies already weakened, but it contained calories. And calories meant one more march, one more battle, one more sunrise. Caesar praises his men for one reason above all others. They did not complain. That mattered to him more than what they ate. Because hunger can break armies faster than swords. Yet these men chewed grass and still kept fighting. That was Rome's true weapon. Number 2. This one may be the darkest of all. Decimation. The punishment where 1 in 10 soldiers was executed by the other 9. Lots were drawn. One man lost. The others lived only if they killed him themselves. Often he was not a stranger. He was your tent mate, your marching partner, your friend. The man who had shared your bread for years. Refuse to strike him. You could die beside him. Strike too softly. Officers watched. Mercy was dangerous. So men beat their own comrades to death because survival demanded obedience. Ancient writers describe the punishment as policy. They discuss discipline, fear, and deterrence. They do not describe what happened afterward. How those men slept. How they looked at each other. How they continued serving side by side. Some scars leave no mark the eye can see. Number 1. In 9 AD, 3 Roman legions marched into the Teutoburg Forest under Publius Quinctilius Varus. They never truly came out. Germanic forces under Arminius ambushed them in endless rain mud and woods that shattered Roman formation warfare. Somewhere between 15 and 20,000 men entered. Only a fraction survived. Those who escaped no longer had an army, no standards, no officers, no supply lines, no camp, no certainty Rome even knew they still lived. They moved through hostile forest in autumn darkness. They traveled in tiny groups. They hid by day, walked by night, ate whatever roots, berries, or scraps they could find, abandoned anything too heavy to carry. Many were hunted down later. Some were enslaved for years. A few reached Roman territory, after weeks of crawling, through a world that wanted them dead. When Emperor Augustus heard the news, he reportedly struck his head against the wall and cried, "Varus, give me back my legions." But the legions were gone. Only scattered men remained. Men who survived not through glory, but by refusing to stop moving after everything they knew had been destroyed. Final thought. Every story on this list reveals the same truth. These men were not trying to be heroes. They were trying to stay alive. When thirsty, they drank what could kill them. When starving, they ate what disgusted them. When terrified, they did what conscience would normally forbid. From the outside, these choices seem shocking. Inside those moments, they were simply necessary. Maybe that was Rome's greatest lesson. Not how to conquer, not how to fight, but how to keep going when all structure is gone. Because anyone can be strong when life is easy. The real test begins when everything is lost. So ask yourself honestly, if you had no food, no water, no hope, no rescue, what would you do to survive?